Welcome to Thrive in the Word. Thank you for joining us in our study of the seven churches of Asia Minor, or the seven churches of Revelation. We're so glad that you've joined us. Again, if you haven't been keeping up with this, go back and listen to the prior videos, because it's so important that we build a foundation. When you teach expository in an expository way like we're doing, it's very important that you follow along every day and consistently receive what's being said, because we build on the previous verses. Today we're in verse number 14 of the second chapter of Revelation. If you have your Bibles, I would like for you to get your Bibles out and look at what Jesus is saying through John to the church at Pergamum. Because you know what? Jesus is saying some really heavy things. But he's not saying them in the light of destroying them, in the light of causing them harm. He's saying these things to teach them how to become overcomers. So, the verse 14, and you really need to listen to what Jesus is saying. It's vitally important. This is what he says: "But I have a few things against you, because you have there some who hold the teaching of Balaam." What in the world is the teaching of Balaam? Well, first of all, let's take a look at the first part of this verse. He said, "I've got something against you." In other words, there's something that's standing in the way of our relationship. There's something that's causing trouble in our relationship with each other. And so he says, I have a few things against you. And then he says, there are some. Now notice he didn't say everybody in the church. He says there are some who are in the church that have given themselves to the teachings of Balaam. Now, let me say this. The church stands together. He's not saying all you people in the church at Pergamum, all of you are giving yourselves over to the teaching of Balaam. That's not what he's saying. He's saying there's some of you. And you see, I believe that we need to understand that Jesus is expecting the people of the church to bring correction to those who are in error. I believe he's saying this so that the people can minister to each other and bring deliverance and freedom to those who are in the teaching of Balaam. Jesus is taking a stand against the teaching of Balaam. Now, what in the world is the teaching of Balaam? Well, you'll have to go back, all the way back to the Old Testament. The teaching of Balaam was the teaching Balak that the way to destroy the people of Israel was to have the women, the unbelieving Gentile women, to come into the camp, and the Israelite men to marry those women. This is something that we don't talk about much in our churches. It's called mixed marriage. And I'm not talking in racial terms. I really don't care about the racial parts of marriage. But you know what? We need to understand that men and women who are believers should never marry someone who is an unbeliever. Why? You see, Balak comes to Balaam and he says, I want to defeat Israel. How can I do it? And Balaam, by the way, who was not a righteous prophet, he was not a godly man, but Balaam said, you know, this is what you can do to defeat Israel. He said, send your women over to Israel and let these Israeli men marry these women. Because what will happen is those women will turn the hearts of a believer against God. And that will bring judgment upon the people of Israel because they've turned their hearts away. You know, the people that you are married to, in other words, the people that you are in covenant relationship with, have a strong ability to turn your heart. If you're married to a righteous man or woman, you know what? You'll find strength in that marriage. And that strength will come for you to live and to serve God. We need to understand that in marriage, that there's a strength that comes, and the strength comes to turn and to minister. And if you're married to a believer, that believer should be turning you and ministering to you in a way that's godly. But on the other hand, if you go out and you marry someone who is not a believer, then you know what? That person will pull you away. And let me just say this, it's not just marrying, it's dating them. You know, we worked with youth for many years, and we told our youth, you don't date an unbeliever, because it's much easier to pull you down than it is for you to pick them up. And you see, that's what Jesus is getting at. One of the things he's got against this church, and again, when I say against it, one of the things that's causing this church to not walk in a close relationship was who they're married to. They're marrying, the church is marrying the men of the church, and I think you can actually reverse that and say the women of the church are marrying unbelievers, and those unbelievers are turning the hearts of the believer. So Jesus is saying, he's saying that some of these people are holding to the teachings of Balak, or the teachings of Balaam, and then he goes on in verse number 14, who kept teaching Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel. And then he goes on, and to eat sacrifices to idols and commit acts of immorality. You see, first comes the marriage. Then comes this power of, hey, you know what? Let's worship this God. Hey, let's get involved with immorality. Let's go visit the temple prostitutes, and let's go do this. And you see what happens is it turns a person away from their relationship with Jesus. Now my time is up for today. I hope you join us again next week. God bless you.